Well, welcome to our third installment of our, second installment of our weekly Lunch and Learn webinar. And today's topic is around Count All North Carolina Kids. So just to remind you that we have weekly webinars going all the way until March. To tune in. I won't waste too much of your time because we have great presenters today, and I want to make sure that there's enough time in the end for everyone to have questions. So we'll go from there. All right, and so I'm Darrell Johnson, Communications Outreach Director at NC Counts Coalition, and our speakers are today's Whitney Tucker, Research Director from NC Child, Jane Morrow, Executive Director of Smart Start of New Hanover County, and Cassandra Brooks, owner of Little Believers Academy. And so just to give you a little rundown about what NC Counts does before we get into the presenters. So NC Counts was formed in 2017 around census efforts. Overall, there's 3 moving parts in the state of North Carolina. The U.S. Census Bureau, this is ultimately their project. This is a nationwide effort to get everyone enumerated across the country. And then you have NC Complete Count Commission, which is formed by Governor Cooper, and they're the strategists and advisors to the governor. And NC Counts, we work as a nonprofit organization around advocating for the census. So we do that by connecting people from nonprofit organizations, government, community leaders, or organizers, and we meet together through convenings just to connect people to share information and advocate for people to participate in the census and just come up with strategizing ideas of how to address the issues in our hard-to-count communities. And so, like I said, every Friday, join us for our Lunch and Learn until March 7th. Around noon, so we'll talk for about an hour and hopefully talk about a whole lot of issues around hard-to-count communities and census efforts in North Carolina. And for more updates, you can go to our website at nccensus.org. If you haven't signed up to join the coalition, please do so. That's where we share a lot of our updates about what's going on and resources around the census. And we also have an events calendar. So if you have events in your community coming up around the census, please share it with us so we can put it on the calendar so our partner organizations can know and possibly help out at those events. And it's 53 days until Census Day 2020. As many of you know, the forms actually go out mid-March, so it's less than that, but April 1st is a reference day around the census, so we count down to that day. So it's right around the corner. It's time to roll our sleeves up and get out there and get our communities counted. And so our first presenter is Whitney Tucker, like I said, Research Director at NC Child. Whitney was 8 when she wanted to be a pop star. Trying to figure out if Whitney can sing or not. We're going to find out eventually. She has come close in her role as data guru at NC Child. She leads the agency's research on child well-being and provides actionable analysis of public policies impacting children and families. Whitney also engaged in research for academic publication with special interest in advocacy, evaluation, and policy tools advancing racial and ethnic equity. She has an MPH from the University of South Carolina and a BA in public policy from Vanderbilt University. She is also the captain of NC Child Fund Team and lead restaurant critic. Everyone, please welcome Whitney Tucker.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I always like to check before I get started. We recently updated staff bios on the NC Child site, you know, make us a little more relatable. So I appreciate you guys using this one. It's pretty funny, I think. We'll never find out if I can sing. So a little bit more about NC Child to get us started. I wanted to give you guys a little bit background on how the census came up as an issue for us as an organization, a little bit about why it's important generally, and then especially about the undercount of young children, why it happens, and what we can be doing about it. There we go. All right, so this is NC Child's mission statement. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan public policy advocacy organization that works across a broad range of issue areas to advocate for policies that are good for kids and families. We have focus areas that are here up on the slide, but we try to stay nimble throughout legislative sessions and pick up new issues as we need to, if they're really in the best interest of kids and families and need some advocacy behind them. We combine the power of 4 different strategies to really achieve those goals. Strategic communications, direct advocacy, what most people call lobbying, community engagement, and then also research and data analysis, which is where a lot of my work comes in. the census came up as an issue for us because a lot of the programs and services that children and families depend on actually get funding as a result of our census count. And we were alerted to that by some national child advocacy groups that we're a part of. And it really became apparent really quickly that the census is this thread that ties through a lot of child and family well-being in our communities, not only at the national level and the state level, but at the community and local level as well. To understand why it's so important for us to be counting young kids and working on addressing the fact that we haven't done a good job of doing that in the past, I think it's important to look at North Carolina's rapidly changing demographics so you can understand what's really at stake this year. The total population in the state is just about 10.4 million and 64% white. For comparison, the child population in North Carolina is just over 2.4 million and only 54% white. This is going to be relevant in a second when we talk about hard to count communities, because those tend to be children of color, right? And so we're seeing that our state is increasingly, full of Black and brown children who we know from previous census results, we don't have a very good history of being able to count well. Another relevant fact is that of all children in the state, fully 1/4 of them, over 600,000, are under age 5. In terms of population trends, the fastest growing population of children in the state is Hispanic and Latino children born to North Carolina resident parents or to US born parents who migrated to North Carolina from other states. From 2010 to 2016, the Census Bureau estimates that North Carolina's Hispanic population grew by 132,000 new residents, which represented a 16.5% increase. Latino children now account for 18% of our state's children under the age of 5. This is all important to note because it means that the 2020 census is going to be the first in which North Carolina can capture the magnitude of our state's population growth over that relatively short period of time since the last census. And that's going to be particularly difficult because not only are Black and brown children less likely to be counted accurately in the census, as I've already stated, but children under 5 are largely undercounted as well. So Hispanic or Latino children under age 5 account for 2 of our top 3 populations with the highest net undercount rates from previous censuses, which you're going to see in my next slides. So if North Carolina is going to receive its due share of congressional representation and financial resources from the federal government that comes from the apportionment of resources based on our census count, we're going to need to take significant steps really fast to reach out to young families and young Latino families especially. So this is a chart of the net undercount rates from the 2010 census. These are national results, but it just is underscoring my point that young children had a higher net undercount rate in the last census by far than any other major demographic group from 2010. Since 1980, our country has actually had a worsening net undercount rate of young children in the census, even while our coverage of older children and adults has improved. There we go. That is worth noting in light of our state's population trends and also that historic undercount of young children, is that when you break out our undercount of young children by race, we see even worse undercounts for Hispanic and Latino children and Black children. It's estimated that in the 2010 census, North Carolina missed more than 25,000 young children in our census. And independent researchers now believe that if those children had been counted, so not even including all of the adults and other age groups and demographic groups that we also may have missed last go round, but if just those 25,000 children had been counted, our state would have already received an additional seat in Congress. So why are young children missed so often? It's complicated, but I think that the simplest response is really twofold. So one is that young children are not included in households that do return a form, which I'll talk about in a second. And then the other is that young children are more likely to live in population groups and in household types that the Census Bureau considers hard to count. And I've put up on the slide that definition of hard to count from the Census Bureau and some examples of what those households or population groups look like. In our state, young children disproportionately live in areas with those sort of characteristics. And you can see in the chart on this slide, the percent of each age group, 0 through 4, and then 10 through 17, that lives in the conditions that are listed on the left. So previous census results have shown that children of color, low-income children, children in immigrant families, children in young families, so where the household head is very young, children in rental households, all tend to be at high risk of being undercounted. And in our state, those children are also very likely to be under age 5. Also, for clarification, complex families, which is one of the hard to count population groups you see listed here, that means family types like a household where the household head might not actually be the primary caregiver or the parent of that child. So maybe a grandmother owns the house, but her son and his daughter live there, right? And so when she fills out the census, she might not include them, or she might not include them both because they're not living there permanently, they're staying with her for a while, they don't own the home, lots of different reasons, right? And then it also includes family types where there might be, for example, a grandparent who lives in assisted living and has children staying with them who aren't actually supposed to be there, right? So a lot of people are not aware of the fact that the Census Bureau cannot share that information that people will fill in their census forms with. And so they don't want to include the kid on the form because they don't want anyone to know that child is actually there. And it's worth noting that when we're talking about these hard to count population groups, that the children who are least likely to be counted are also the children who are most likely to depend on the services and programs that rely on the census count. So they really stand to suffer the most from any reductions in funding that come if we get the count wrong. And so when I'm talking about reductions in funding, I want you to understand that this is not chump change. This chart is showing of the programs and services that receive their funding based, at least in part, on the census count, what portion of that funding from the census count of that program that just serves children is at stake in the census. So we see here that an undercount of kids, of young children in particular, would also equate to huge reductions in federal funding for more general needs statewide like these programs, but also things like highway planning, construction. It would also really impact our data accuracy. And so it would make it difficult for local planners to determine where we need new businesses, things like grocery stores and childcare centers, and then also emergency planning, because our hospitals and emergency routes are, where the hospital should be located, and how quickly those emergency routes can get to homes depend a lot on the information that we get back from the census. And you can see here the implications of that undercount. And it's worth noting for some historical perspective that in 2000, North Carolina undercounted children in the census, and as a result, eligible children were put on a waiting list for our state's CHIP program until additional funds could be secured. So we really don't want to see anything like that happen again, especially with a program like CHIP, a program like SNAP, things that families really depend on to be able to meet their basic needs. And so to really get an accurate count, we have to address some of the reasons that families are not including their child, even on forms where that are returned. And those are complicated. So the Census Bureau estimates that about 80 to 85% of the young children who were missed in the 2010 census were missed from families that did return a questionnaire. And they know that information about the undercount from establishing things like birth records and death records, immigration records, and then getting estimates from things like the American Community Survey, which are these huge population level surveys, and then comparing those to the census, which is our only true head count of all the residents in the country. And so from all of that, they have ascertained that about 80 to 85% of the young kids we missed aren't the kids who are living in those hard to count populations. That could maybe account for the rest of them, but most of the children who are missed in families that didn't think they needed to be included on the form, even though some other person in the household did. So their omission rate in the 2010 census was 10.3%. And that's compared to that 4.6% net undercount rate I showed you earlier. And so what we need to be doing is talking to families about not only the basic census tagline that you see here, that the census is convenient and that it's safe and that it's required, but also that they need to be sure they return their questionnaire, right? Because that contributes to those hard to count figures, right? That's based on questionnaire returns. But then they also need to count everyone in their household, no matter how old they are. So even children who were born on census day, so on April 1st, they need to be counted in the census. And the Census Bureau, as well as lots of different national organizations, including NALEO, Color of Change, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, have done different messaging research on what messages really motivate people to include their children in the census. But I will say that without going into all of that, for the sake of time, that the Census Bureau found for those resistant to completing their form across all races and ethnicities, the most salient reason to respond to the census was funding for public services. So we really need to emphasize that to families that we talk to in our daily lives. We need to emphasize that to our friends when we're talking about the census. People need to understand that every person that you leave off the form is essentially resulting in something that your community is not going to have for the next 10 years. And so here I'll just end with a quick cheat sheet of places where you can get some additional materials to help you talk about this and to understand this issue more. First, there's the North Carolina Complete Count Commission site. The Complete Count Commission was appointed by the governor and is the official state census coordinators. But I will say that there you'll find links to Census Bureau resources, including 2020census.gov, which is also a really great resource. And I should probably add it to this cheat sheet because that's where you can find things like posters and fact sheets and songs and materials for pre-K classrooms. All of those things are available through the Census Bureau now. They've done a lot of work since December to really put out a lot of that stuff. And if you have trouble finding it, I'm happy to help. NC Child also has a census webpage, ncchild.org/census, where we've compiled all of the materials for children under age 5. So this is the fastest place to go to hear specifically about the young child undercount outside of all of the other groups that are really difficult to count in the census. And we're also putting out additional materials as it leads up to Census Day, including videos that you can share on social media. We have a social media toolkit with things that you can post on Facebook and Twitter, and blurbs that you can put in your outreach materials to any networks that you might have, and all of that you can find on our site. And then there's also Hágase Contar from NALEO, which is a really great hub for national and state level resources specific to the Hispanic and Latino community. And there you'll also find that they have a separate site called Hazme Contar that's about just the undercount of children under age 5 and has lots of great multilingual resources relating to the undercount of kids. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm gonna turn it over to our next presenter.
All right, thank you, Whitney. We appreciate that. Always good information when you present about the undercounted children. Next one, I have Dr. Jane Morrow. Jane is the Executive Director of Smart Start of New Hanover County, Go Wilmington, a local nonprofit that is part of a statewide early childhood initiative designed to address the needs of children in the first 2,000 days of life. She came to Wilmington in the fall of 2014 after working for Smart Start at the state level. She served as an implementation coach coordinator for their federal Early Learning Challenge Grant Transportation Zone Project. Prior to that, she served as Executive Vice President of the Albemarle Smart Start, I can't even talk straight today. Albemarle Smart Start Partnership, and as an evaluation consultant for multiple nonprofit organizations. Jane grew up overseas in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. She earned her undergraduate degree from William & Mary and her master's in sociology from University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Please welcome Jane. Dr. Morrow, are you there? We cannot hear you. You might want to unmute your device.
Me?
There you go.
There we go. Okay, can everyone hear me now?
Yes, we can now.
Okay, great. So thank you. Yeah, first to say thank you for Whitney for what an amazing overview. A couple of my first slides were some of that same information, but not presented with anywhere near the detail or the depth of research. So I might skip over a couple of my slides because Whitney already had that well covered. But one of the questions when we were asked to do this is, why is our organization interested in the work and how did our organization become involved? And so obviously Smart Start, every Smart Start across the state is interested in serving and representing children in that birth to 5 or that prenatal to 5 age range. And so this is our constituency. This is who we need to make sure gets represented so that they have the services, as Whitney said. But frankly, I got involved more specifically because I was asked. And I think that maybe is the first message. If there's somebody who isn't at the table who needs to be, the first thing we need to do is ask them. So our county, like I imagine most other ones, has its own complete count committee. And there was an education subcommittee that I was asked to sit on. There's also another committee that was working with the faith community and around homeless and around our Latinx community, Spanish-speaking community. So there's different groups. All of them are being served by different committees. But because we work with child care centers, we were asked to serve on the education subcommittee. And so one of the things I'll talk about is a little bit of some things we want to try and do with some of our child care facilities. Let me jump ahead then. I think I'm advancing the slides. It says I'm controlling Stacy's screen, but I push the button and nothing's happening. Okay, try one more time. There we go. Okay, so again, just repeating some of the stuff that Whitney said. I'm just going to try and keep going forward. Sorry.
Let me check something.
Yeah.
Okay, is it working now?
Let me move back and forth.
No? Okay.
Not really.
Give me one second.
Oh, well. I can just say to somebody next one or something.
Okay.
So maybe we can, yeah, so go back one. Yeah. So, okay, forward one, since Whitney covered all of that. She also covered about, why might it be that young children are undercounted? And again, just to reiterate some of the things that she said, that people who have young children were actually slightly less likely than the overall population to say that they would respond to the census. And when the census is where do you live and sleep, most of the time on April 1st. So if somebody's just come home from the hospital and they're staying with their mom, if they plan on buying a house next week and they're just not thinking of where they live and sleep on that day. They also may be first-time census takers. So if you've got a parent who is 22 years old, a first-time parent, and they've got a 18-month-old, last time the census came around, they were in their parents' household. They probably are just a little bit less familiar with the census, a little bit less knowledge overall, as well as possibly some mistrust issues about what will be done with this data, how will it be used, things of that sort that we talked about a little bit. So next. And again, reiterating what was said, so funding for public services was the most important reason people gave for why they would be willing to complete the form. Whitney went over a number of those things. If her slides are available, she has some great data. There is also a website at the bottom of this slide that also talks about where some of those federal funds go. So when you think about who specifically you're trying to reach, if you're trying to get a food bank to partner with you about how they might reach the families that they're serving, especially those with young children, talk about some of the benefits that have to do with making sure that children have a WIC program, a SNAP program, and other food programs. Okay, next. So this is maybe where we can build on some of what Whitney talked about, not just why do people do it and why might it be hard to reach them, why is it when people are in complex families, things of those sort, but it is also a little bit about the messenger. We are more likely in general to believe something, to act on something when we have a trusting relationship. So who asks matters. So myself as a director of Smart Start, there are people that I have relationships with that if we put on our Facebook page, hey, it's important to take the census, we might be that trusted messenger and they might be, oh yeah, I need to make sure I do that. But for some other people, we might not be the best person. And so then it's, do we talk with our faith leaders in the community? Is it a message that needs to come from their place of worship? Do we talk to the food bank? That's a person that someone might have a relationship with. Do we talk with their child care providers directly? Then they're the ones sending the message home to children. So we want to find and use those existing trusted relationships as much as possible because people are willing to believe what someone says and do something for them when there is that relationship in existence. So in that sense, the county asked me to be on the education subcommittee, and then I, in turn, am going to figure out who already has relationships with families with young children in our community in addition to us, and try and ask them to help reach those families themselves. Next one. So it's also, we want to meet people where they are. So we all know how important the census is. We're brought in, we understand an additional representative to our state and possibly two. All of the funding for SNAP and WIC and other programs is at stake. But we want to make sure that we reach families where they are and that we meet the people that we're asking to help be the messenger, to meet them where they are in terms of what they're interested in doing and what they're able to do. So for example, one of the things that we want to do here in New Hanover County is work with child care programs and have them send the children home one day with just a sticker that says, something along the lines of count me in, complete the census form. Maybe there's some additional information to help parents go, oh yeah, resources are at stake because we know that's why they want to do it. But if your child comes home from school saying, don't forget to count me in, that we hope is a powerful message for parents as well. The diaper bank here in New Hanover County, along with the diaper bank in Wake County, are going to add a flyer or a sticker to all of the diapers that they send out to the families. We'll ask similar things we have a backpack program. We can ask similar things of existing parenting classes. So the families already have a relationship with those organizations. We're not asking them to do extra work to find this information out, but we can add that flyer, that sticker, that information to materials that are already going out to families. Organizations already have agency newsletters, email blasts, text messages, whatever way they are already communicating with families, and so we might ask them to do that as well. We'll be asking the school system who has a texting that they send out to all of the families to include information about census, and don't forget the children who are not in school yet on their way of already connecting with families. Finding community meetings and hand out information. In our county, we have a resiliency task force, and so I got up there along with someone from the League of Women Voters who locally has produced a census flyer and talked to all of the different agencies and organizations that were at that meeting handed out some information about the census. So again, meeting people where they are, where it's easy for them to get information, can get you more sort of bang for your buck. And then think outside the regular box, local churches, temples, synagogues, serve families with young children. They may have a nursery program. Can you ask them to connect? Do you have a group that does a stroller walk at the mall? If you can connect with them, all of the people in those kinds of informal social groups also have their own networks. So can you get them to say something on their Facebook page? There may be some other child-focused recreational organizations, Pop Warner Leagues or the Fit for Fun or a bouncy house place. Again, think about where parents are already going and try and connect with those organizations. So it's not a heavy lift for either the organization you're partnering with or for the parent, and you're trying to get that trust. Okay, next slide. Again, going back to sort of that what's in it for me, not that we aren't all altruistic in this work, but we really do. If you want somebody to act on something, being able to make that direct connection and give them that meaning is going to help them to actually take that action. So again, if individuals are most likely to complete the census because it's tied to public services, then connect to those services that family needs or may need in the future. Even if it isn't a low-income family that might benefit from some of the public services, their child's going to go to elementary school one day, and they need the county to be planning to build sufficient numbers of elementary schools. So there's all kinds of reasons, no matter who you are, that good census data can be beneficial to you. And then again, as I said, if you're trying to get people to partner with you, and like census, that's not, I'm busy already. I've got a lot to do. A lot of what they do or what we do as public serving organizations is also tied to a lot of federal funding, whether that directly impacts our work and our organizations, or whether it is the kind of things that benefit the families that we serve. And so therefore, is we want to advocate on behalf of those families, even if we're not necessarily immediately the recipient of those monies. So if you're talking with child care providers, talk about subsidy dollars and federal block grant money. That might be more of a motivation to go, yeah, I will try and tell my teachers to put that sticker on. If you're talking about food programs, talk about SNAP and WIC dollars. Again, make it easy for people to say yes. Okay, next slide. So this is my last one. Just wanted to end with local matters also in terms of trusted things. So as wonderful as a lot of the materials that the Census Bureau has, that's far away. That's a couple of layers out. There is the Make NC Count. That's better. That's the state. I'm part of North Carolina. I want an additional representative. But we're going to have a Cape Fear Counts website as well that will have some videos, some flyers, some local stats, some social media posts that can be forwarded. And so if I'm trying to talk to my neighbor, I probably will have an easier time making that connection, even if I'm talking about federal dollars coming into the community, if we talk about what's happening locally in our county. And so the federal census has maps of the most undercounted communities geographically by census tract. And so if you show somebody a map of your county and say, this is the community that's not counted, we need to work to get people who live there counted, that might be an easier sell. And as wonderful as this Cape Fear Counts website may be, and it is also created by the county and by, in that sense, the government. So for some people looking to NC Child and saying, hey, I want to share the social media and the flyers that they produce because they're an independent child advocacy organization. So again, just sort of thinking about being strategic when you are trying to reach families with who is the right messenger, who does this information need to come from, and it's usually the person closest to the family. You want to get closer geographically and closer in terms of existing relationships. Any questions, or we save those for the end?
We save those for the end.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Morrow. Really appreciate that. We'll move right along to Cassandra Brooks. Cassandra Brooks is the owner and operator of Little Believers Academy. She operates 2 5-star STEM centers dedicated to quality childcare. Ms. Brooks is married with 4 children, including a set of twins. She's a member of Upper Room Church of God in Christ and helps in many areas. She's a member at Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and serves the community through various volunteer opportunities. She currently serves on the advisory committee for Wake County Smart Start. She currently serves on the board for the Partnership with Children in Johnston County. She is also the inaugural mentor for the NCA EYC. She currently serves on the board of North Carolina Partnership for Children. In the past, she has served as chapter secretary at Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. In the past, she served in management at International Business Machines, IBM. Mrs. Brooks has a Master's of Education from North Carolina A&T State University. She also holds a BS in Business Management from North Carolina A&T State University. Please welcome Cassandra Brooks.
Hi, everybody. Thank you again for having me today. I'm just so excited. I've been working closely with Whitney and NC Child and all of the great information she shared thus far, and Dr. Morrow as well regarding the importance of the census. So I'll go ahead and just move forward with the slides here. To the next one. Now, I may be having problems as well, so someone can help me advance. But I just want to talk about why my organization is interested in doing the work of this with the census. We serve young children and families of color who are often undercounted. We have a center in Wake County as well as Johnston County, and we serve low-income families on a day-to-day basis. And so we really have those connections, and we built trust with them and built trust in our community. And so they look to us, often for help with many issues that they face, whether it be food insecurities, food issues, childcare issues, they just, you name it, we're able to, try to point them in the right direction to help. And so, like I was saying, we're on the front lines. We see the families struggling. We really see a big issue with housing, the need for quality child care and subsidy vouchers to help pay for child care. And so that's why we're interested in doing the work, because we see the families struggling from day to day and what they actually need and how this money brought down could really assist those families. And then next, I want to go to how did my organization become involved in the work. I'm going to advance to the next slide here. And so we became involved. We've really worked closely with NC Child over the past year or so, and we've built a really great relationship with them and my staff. We've had teachers who have been impacted due to the lack of Medicaid expansion, but that's another topic. So we've had teachers who have suffered illnesses, and death has impacted their families. And so many of the families that have been impacted, they have food issues, so not being able to receive food stamps. They do not have access to health care. Just, you name it, they're not able to live on a day-to-day. They have housing issues. And like I said, they're just struggling to survive, to help them survive. And so I just want to go into a few of the things that we have planned, things that we've worked on. Right now, as Whitney had stated earlier, we have a big push. We have a social media campaign. So we're trying to really appeal to the millennials, to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, even going to explore Snapchat and other means to try to get the word out about the census. to them so they can make sure that they're counting children, educating families. We've had a big toy drive in our community in December, and a lot of the families expressed to me that they didn't understand that you were even supposed to count the children. And so just kind of knocking down some of those myths in the area and in the low-income areas that we have, that, you know, this is all tied to SNAP benefits. This is all tied to child care subsidy, educating them. So we've explored that. We've explored giving out different materials from another program that we're with, so swag year, if you will, just to continue to promote the census as well. And then we also have a good relationship with the different directors in our area that operate child care centers throughout the Wake County, Johnson County area. And so just explaining to them so they can pass out swag and make sure that they are on track to educating their families, to make sure that they are counting their young children as well. And so we have already explored that. We have meetings coming up regarding that later this month. And I just put that, you know, we'll continue to educate the community on the need for all children to be counted. And so that was one of the biggest pushes at our big toy drive and event, that we served well over hundreds of families in December, that we want all children to be counted, you know, whether it's the infant all the way up, you know, we want every child in your household to be counted. And so that information was really taken well by the community, and we'll continue to push throughout as the census is growing closer, and continue to educate, you know, the many families and people that we have relationships with. I want to thank you again for your time. That's all that I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. And I guess the important themes from today is just the importance of how census dollars affect the development of a child from, we're talking birth all the way to 10 years of age. And like everyone has pretty much said today, you know, these programs are integral parts of their development into teenagers and adults. So without the proper funding for those programs, we're really hurting our children. So thank you everyone for presenting today. And we're going to get into a few questions. We had our final statewide convening this week, and there was some questions around children and how to count children. So I want to get a couple of those, and then we have a few questions in the queue. So we have enough time to get through all of them, I believe. So the first question would be, how would pregnant women count their soon-to-be child as well?
So this is Whitney. So if a woman is currently pregnant and is due to give birth on or before April 1st, she should count that baby in the census. Now, I'll also say that if, you know, she's really not sure, or doctors aren't sure, it's around April 1st, could be April 3rd, you know, something like that, that because I do not work for the Census Bureau, I feel completely comfortable telling you that you should tell that woman to count that baby, right? That child, I think it's important to emphasize, not counting them means that we are missing out on the resources that child could benefit from for the next 10 years of that child's life. So the official Census Bureau response is on or before April 1st due date, then count them. But you know, if it's close, but not quite April 1st, I would say still count them, because, you know, childbirth is a tricky business. It could be before then, you don't know.
Thank you. And so the next question is, I know the conversation is about young children, but would parents count their college students that are currently off at school?
So no, schools count college students as part of their group quarters in the census.
And for parents who share custody, which parent would count their child?
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's my understanding that it's where they live most of the time, and if it's literally 50-50, then I would say wherever they are on April 1st.
Exactly that.
And one thing about college students, just real quick, if your college-age student lives off campus and is not counted in group homes, they should be filling it out for themselves as a person who's living in a particular apartment.
Super important note.
And speaking of college students, I want to plug in there, the next week's webinar is talking about the college count and the count around college students and how to get them involved with census activity and preparation. So that's a good segue for me to put out there. Next week's webinar is around college students. Another question is, I know the citizenship question is exhausted, but what advice would you give to encourage immigrant families to participate in the census and count their kids?
So, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, one thing that I've heard someone say is that census enumerators will come around because it's if someone doesn't fill out the form, that's the job of the enumerators, is to come around and count people who may not have been heard of already. So if you don't want an enumerator coming to your door, you might want to fill the census out ahead of time, whether it's online or on paper. So that might be one motivation, is, hey, do this so someone might not come knocking. And the other just might be the same thing that we would have with everybody, that your child's future for the next 10 years is not dependent upon, but can be influenced by the numbers of people that live in this community. And so every child being counted matters for public services and the public good.
I think those are super important points. I would also emphasize the fact that the responses are safe. So if you answer the census, your responses cannot be shared with ICE or any other agency. That's by law, that's Title 13 of US Code. And Census Bureau employees are sworn to life to protect that information. And if they violate that oath, then the penalties are a fine up to $250,000 and or up to 5 years in prison. And people take that really seriously in the Census Bureau. And, there haven't been reports of problems with the information, being shared or getting out in the past. So I think that's important. Also the fact that because you are legally required to fill out the census, the enumerators will come. And then also I would say that it is your right? So even if you're not a citizen of this country, Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution mandates that a census be done and that every resident be counted, and your citizenship is completely irrelevant to that count. And so you deserve those resources that will come from being counted as a person who is living in this country, and you're forfeiting them if you don't answer.
Awesome. And what would you say causes parents to leave their children off the census?
This is Cassandra, and my speaking with parents, they just didn't realize that you're supposed to count your children. And so I've been educating them that you are supposed to count everybody in your household. And so that has been the myth in the community, that you're only supposed to count the adults. And so just trying to break those myths and those barriers.
Yeah, we've definitely heard a lot of people saying that because kids are too young to be in school, or because they don't have any other interaction with the government, that they feel they didn't realize that the government was interested in them. Also, there are people who are concerned about privacy of their information, but also especially of their children's, and starting essentially a footprint of information about them with the government. And so that's something that we really need to be able to message to people about. And then we've also heard, especially in the Black community, I hear a lot that people don't see the point. They feel like filling out the census in general a lot of the time has not translated to new and better resources in their communities over time. And so we really just need to be able to point people toward that information about how much money is really behind it, and saying that, only way we're going to be able to see any changes and be able to point to anything and say that it got better is because we counted these kids. If we keep doing what we've always done, we're going to get the same results we've always gotten.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would obviously reiterate everything that was said, and then also just point to, as Whitney talked about in the beginning, sometimes when there are complex households, it can be confusing. If I'm staying at my mom's, but I don't stay there permanently, and she gets a census form, she might not think of me as a resident of that household. I'm just visiting for a month or two. And so again, I think sometimes it's making sure that people understand that it's a point in time, and it's where you are living and sleeping on April 1st. Because if you're not counted here, you're not going to be counted somewhere else. So this isn't sort of where's your permanent address. It's just we want to get a snapshot of who lives where on this day. So helping people understand, even if situations are temporary, that they need to be counted where they are.
Awesome. And so what would you suggest for other organizations to do to make sure to get out the word about make sure families count their children and to advocate for a complete count of children? What are some things that organizations can do from their capacity to help get that count out and help drive participation?
Yeah, I would say go to NC Child and forward their Facebook page or Twitter or Instagram, wherever they're putting stuff out. Forward, share those things, share it from your local county's complete count work. Things that are not a particularly heavy lift. You don't have to create a flyer if you don't want to. There's information out there. So just basically asking people to include it in what they're already doing in their social media pages that they already have, the newsletters that they already have, sticking a flyer in some diapers or backpacks that they're already distributing. So if you make it an easy yes, because it's not a heavy lift, and then just find as many partners as possible. If someone hears this from 4 or 5 different people, 4 or 5 different places, it's likely to stick.
Definitely. I'd just say that at this point, you don't need to be focused on making new things. It's about, making new resources. It's about making those new connections and getting the word out further. Yep.
Well, awesome. Do we have any more questions from the participants today? All right. Well, thank you everyone for participating. Thank you to speakers. Like I said, next week is talking about the count around college students. Be sure to tune in. We got you out a little bit early so you can enjoy your lunch without us hearing you eat. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.